Hello, and welcome to Bill and Sarah Bishop's December 2017 trip to Peru. We signed up for a first-class boat trip on the two major tributaries of the Amazon. On the way, we visited Machu Picchu and other special places in the highlands.
First, a few notes about Peru and Lima, its capital. Along the Pacific coast is desert. To the east is the Andean uprise. Further east is the jungle, which covers 60% of the country. Mining and agriculture are the basis of the economy. Peru produces all the food it needs and exports organic crops primarily to China. It produces cocaine, second only to Colombia. The government is trying to increase the production of coffee and cocoa to replace cocaine. 3 million people still speak Quechua, a guttural language with clicks. I learned the traditional greetings: Waiki, man to man; duray, woman to man; nyantay, woman to woman; and panay, man to woman.
Lima is in a desert where it never rains, but there are mists and fogs and rivers from the mountains that bring water to the city, and an interesting coastline. This city of 11 million is divided into 40 districts, each with a mayor, city hall, central plaza, church, and of course, tax collector. We saw lots of restoration work going on, as each district needs to spend its budget before the end of the year or lose it.
The Inca civilization, with Cusco as its capital, ruled from 1100 to 1532, and tended to copy the culture of all those who preceded it. Tawantinsuyo was the name of the culture, while Inca was the title of the ruler whom the Spaniards encountered. We imagine Inca was easier for the Spaniards to say and remember than Tawantinsuyo. Peru was conquered in 1532 by Francisco Pizarro and was a Spanish colony for 300 years. During the conquest, the Pope divided South America between Spain and Portugal. The Guianas, part of Venezuela, Brazil, and Paraguay went to Portugal, and the rest to Spain. All of the Spanish holdings were called Peru, and most of the Spanish conquest started here. Modern Peru was the last country in South America to declare independence in 1821 after an 11-year war.
Gonzalo Pizarro, Francisco's brother, crossed the Andes with Francisco de Orellana and sailed down the Amazon for 4,500 miles, looking for gold, silver, and cinnamon, and found none. They encountered many tribes with a large population, but it was centuries before their records of whom they encountered were believed. The only type of riches brought out of the Amazon was rubber in the early 1900s, but at a huge cost in lives of local people who were enslaved to do the backbreaking work.
In Lima, we visited Huaca Pucllana, an archaeological site that served as a sacrificial burial site from 400 to 1300 AD. The bricks are stacked such that frequent earthquakes in the region would not destroy the site. There are some 50 archaeological sites in Lima, but very few have been excavated. Digging and artifact collecting, looting, began in the 1930s. Outside Cusco, Puca Pucara, where we stood, was a lookout site to watch for visitors. Signals were sent to other sites in the mountains through flute players, mirrors, and runners to warn the inhabitants of potential invaders. The important square blocks marked an entrance, while the other stones were just the wall. At Quenco, at summer solstice, the sun causes a puma head shadow. In Inca culture, puma is the present or above ground, snake is the past or underground, and condor is the future or the heavens.
Sacsayhuaman was a fortress of big stones that guarded Cusco. It took 80 years to build. The builders drilled holes with stone tools, inserting water, wood, and sand, eventually splitting the rock. Then the rocks were rolled down on logs from a quarry miles away. Only 20% of the fortress is left because the Spaniards took the stones to build their homes. The zigzag pattern of the walls is to protect them from earthquakes. Machu Picchu was my favorite site. It was built on a high ridge to be nearer the gods and for protection from floods and rock slides. It was built from 1340 to 1440, but was never finished, as evidenced by the rock quarry still in the middle of the city. There are some 30 to 45 terraces, 50 houses, 4 churches that have been uncovered, and more to be found. This was an administrative center and royal Inca retreat, more than a religious one, although there was a sacrifice site. The stonework is magnificent. Here, in a restoration, a large stone nail holds up the logs of a roof. A perfect fit shows the excellent stonework that was done for the most important people. All this was done without metal tools, only those of stone and wood. Food was plentiful as the inhabitants grew quinoa, potatoes, corn, and other veggies on terraces. There was also lots of jungle fruit. The dirt for the terraces was brought from the Sacred Valley upstream of the city. The city was abandoned about the time of the conquest, though the Spaniards never knew about it.
There are 2 important peaks of the many that surround the city. Huayna Picchu, in the upper left, was the escape route. Machu Picchu, in the upper right, is in direct line through the city from Huayna Picchu. The city itself was called Pichu Yacta, town surrounded by peaks. When Hiram Bingham, the so-called discoverer of the city, was first taken there in 1911, he misunderstood the name of the mountain for the name of the city. We visited other archaeological sites in the Sacred Valley between Cusco and Machu Picchu. At Moray, the circular terraces of the Huari culture were built around 600 AD. They grew different veggies on different levels, depending on the temperature, wind, and how they collected water. The salt farm at Maras produced pink Inca salt. Brine flows out of the salt mine into the pools, where the water evaporates, leaving layers of this salt. The best salt is in the middle layer. Each pool is managed by a family from the local village.
The Larco Museum in Lima holds 45,000-piece collection of pre-Inca artifacts that features the Mochica people from the first 800 years A.D. They engaged in long-distance trade in precious and semi-precious stones. They had contact with people in other parts of the world and the dubious distinction of bringing syphilis to South America. Their incredible pottery shows men, animals, and food, but no women. Faces are those of the dead, as these pots were burial items. Copper and gold were used only in burials. Many pieces were oversized and or too heavy to be worn. It was thought that people got bigger after they died. Also, bodies were wrapped with huge heads that could support a large crown of gold. Pottery tells the story.
Find something strange in a headdress?
Look to the pottery to explain. In Huari culture, that's 500 to 1000 AD, weaving was very fine, up to 398 threads per inch. There is limited evidence of this fine work, as textiles did not survive long in the burials. It seems the older the culture, the more advanced its art, something like Roman art and architecture in comparison to the Dark Ages in Europe.
We visited the home of a resident in the Sacred Valley. In this household, future meals are locally raised, as guinea pigs are a major source of protein in the Peruvian diet. In Cusco, we enjoyed dinner with Peruvian music that featured the charango, a 10-string mandolin-like instrument, the player in the center of the picture, that totally delighted me, as well as very colorful dancers. On the Amazon, the first thing we noted was the people and their modes of transportation, boats. We learned that locals drink river water, then ingest the sap of ficus trees to kill parasites. Monkeys eat figs to kill their parasites. Our transportation up the lower tributaries was by motorized skiff, with a guide, Erickson in this photo, and a boat driver. Now, the boat drivers think of everything. They brought us fans and washcloths wrapped in ice on the hottest day. We left an extra tip for them, as their thoughtfulness was over the top.
A local female shaman, which is very rare, visited us. She greeted us in her native language, one of 60 such in Peru. As curandera, her specialty is curing tropical diseases and sexual problems. She knows how to use the 150 medicinal plants found in the Amazon. Shaman ceremonies are held for big groups. For these, she has to have a vision based on ingesting ayahuasca, a hallucinogenic.
We were part of an expedition led by Lindblad National Geographic personnel. Everywhere they go, they try to help local organizations. In the Amazon, they focus on empowering women. They support Mingan Peru, which produces a radio program in 8 small villages. Topics include avoiding early pregnancies and sexually transmitted diseases, and promoting female leadership. Women are starting small businesses. Men are no longer drinking away all the profits. Projects include agriculture and fish farming. Mingan Peru pays to establish a project, but the locals have to maintain it. Lindblad National Geographic and their clients are Mingan Peru's only support. At the village we visited, women talked about their successes. Their white blouses and black skirts are special occasion wear. Ribbons, red for blood, green for mountains and trees, and yellow for the sun, decorated their skirts.
San Jorge is a major agricultural community we visited. The inhabitants sell produce and fish to buy salt and kerosene. This community and others are organized by the national government. Local people elect a governor who's in charge of justice, an agent who controls land distribution. Residents pay no taxes because the land is community-owned. If you want to buy your own land, then you register it and pay taxes. Former President Fujimori wanted to preserve native languages and cultures, so he established these communities.
Children are taught in Spanish and in the local native language. I learned one word, Sakakiri Sarita. My name is Sarita. After graduating high school, young people move to the city for a job or stay home and take up agriculture or fish farming. When the fish are of commercial size, they are taken downriver in floating cages to Iquitos to sell. Elsewhere, people still catch fish in nets on the river. Though technology has arrived in San Jorge, it remains a healthy community with no stress and a 70 to 80 years life expectancy for its residents.
In Puerto Miguel, population of approximately 400, there's a major women's market. We supported it by buying their fine crafts. Every village of at least 75 residents has an elementary school. Villages of 300 residents have a secondary school. What you see here is a high school graduation practice. On our Amazon tour, we saw different types of tourist accommodations, some powered by solar panels, and some perched in trees. Back in Lima, we toured Barranco, the Bohemian district, and saw some interesting art. We went to a shop owned by a Welsh woman who collects well-made native crafts of natural fibers and wood. The retablos were exquisite, as was the shop's interior courtyard. Quite a place.
Trees in the Amazon hold water, which moves up to the top. Then transpiration causes rain, which is the whole nature of a rainforest. Trees with stilt roots can tolerate high water. Trees with roots like skirts, such as the fig, cannot. So they are located on higher ground in the forest. Trees are very adaptable. This walking palm has above-ground roots that walk, send out new roots, to get away from rising water. The wood is used for house construction, and the leaves are used for thatched roofs. The small side roots are an anti-inflammatory used for kidney problems. A good way to see the forest canopy was from one of 7 suspension bridges we crossed on a rather long hike. Flowers were exuberant, and we found them in many places. Even in the giant market in Cusco. The most predominant tree in the jungle is the cecropia that grows these giant seed pods. The leaves are the main diet of the 3-toed sloth. Here is the most beautiful fungus we have ever seen, the bridal veil fungus. Nearby was a copal tree, the natural gas tree, which gives off a sap that is both flammable and is used to seal boats. On another day, we went to see giant lily pad lagoons. The male white flower blooms for one day, then turns pink as the female bloom, which lasts about a week. In Lima, Bill is standing next to an amazing wall of succulents. Also in the Cusco market, we saw just a few of the 3,000 varieties of potatoes grown in Peru.
One afternoon on our boat, we were introduced to a lot of native fruits. Some we were not familiar with. The Guanabana annona, otherwise known as soursop, grows on 30-foot trees on high ground. One person twists the tree, or shakes it, the other catches the fruit. A favorite of monkeys, bats, and various birds. Peach palm looks like a red-orange plum, a favorite of large birds. Camu camu, a sour fruit that looks like a grape and is high in vitamin C. Ivory palm is a tasteless jello. Carvings are made from the shell. Cocono looks like a yellow tomato and helps control cholesterol. Cacao seed, suck, don't chew, has a sweet covering. Big rodents eat the Brazil nuts. Macambo is the local name for a relative of cacao. The roasted seeds are tasty.
We saw 63 different bird species, several types of monkeys, and a number of other animals. We include here some photos taken by others. There are some 1,100 plus species of birds in Peru, 11,000 in the world, and 600 species in North America. In Amazonia, we saw amazing color variation. Citizen scientists who live in or visit the region are contributing information to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology on bird sightings. The lab is building an immense database of bird movement and location. Watsin is an ancient bird related to the Archaeopteryx, that flying dinosaur. It is a vegetarian ruminant with 3 stomachs. The young have claws on the ends of their wings, so they may crawl back into the nest should they fall out. Note the headdress on this magnificent bird of prey, the harpy eagle. Our guides were particularly excited about this rare sighting. Here's a captive macaw in an animal rescue facility, and here are hanging nests of the oropendula, among the most common birds we saw. Apparently, this church in the Barranco district of Lima, which still shows damage from the 2014 earthquake, attracts vultures every day. Are they trying to tell us something? During our walks into the jungle, we saw a number of different animals. This green anaconda seems as leery of us as we were of it. As it was off the trail we were walking on, I asked our very local guide how he found it. "I smelled it," he said. "You smelled it?" The snake had either urinated or defecated when it became aware of us, and the guide smelled that. It amazed and humbled us to learn how attuned to their environment are the people who live along the river.
Brown-throated, 3-toed sloths seem to be in the trees everywhere. They eat 250 grams of leaves every day, usually cecropia leaves. They sleep 18 hours a day and climb down to the ground once a week to poop. We tourists were challenged by our guides to be the first one to spot a sloth. It became hard to look at a tree, even here in Colorado, without searching for this iconic animal. The red-backed poison dart frog is poisonous to the touch. When it crawled onto the guide's hand, we all gasped. He put it on the ground, suggested that he would wash his hand, and 6 water bottles were thrust forward. On the other end of the size spectrum is the Mata toto, a huge turtle that eats fish, held up here by our local guide. Some other animal sightings. A baby bicolor porcupine. A Goliath bird-eating tarantula. Night monkeys, aren't they cute? Howler monkey, a male howler monkey kills the babies of his rivals. Pink and gray dolphins. These coatimundi have obviously become pets. The capybara is the largest rodent in the world. Here are 10 long-nosed bats lined up on a tree. We caught some fish, including these piranha with a red belly. There are 30 species of piranha in the Amazon region. And here's Sarah's catfish. On a night island, one of our guides simply scooped the speckled caiman out of the water. Amazonia has 40% of the insects in the world. One of them, a dragonfly, took a rest stop on my hat.
We spent several days in the Pacaya Samiria National Reserve. Established in 1982, it's the largest in Peru. There are 20 communities in the reserve. The people work with the rangers to protect it. It covers 5 million acres. In high water season, about 80% is covered with water. One of the restoration projects involves endangered turtles. People collect the eggs. Rangers plant the eggs, keep the young turtles for several months, sell some in the international trade, and put the rest back into the wild to increase the population.
Now that we've introduced you to Peru and Lima, a bit of history, archaeology, modern culture, and the flora and fauna, we'll give you a quick summary of our trip in chronological order. We started our Peruvian adventure in Lima visiting Spanish colonial sites with one other couple. The Iglesia y Convento de San Francisco y Catacumbas contains burials of 25,000 people. It's still an active Franciscan monastery. There are ongoing burials. There are displays of big bones of type that were excavated. People donated money to be buried under the church as the shortest route to heaven. La Catedral, the principal cathedral in Lima, is highly decorated. All colonial art was religious as a way of teaching and evangelizing. For example, there were highly decorated alcoves inside the church, each dedicated to a saint. One played the violin to get attention. Another held a broom as one of the working people. Another carried a bag of never-ending bread. A fourth was Saint Rose, the first female saint of the Americas. The cathedral interior, the main altar, was magnificent. The presidential palace, on the same square as the cathedral, shows similar architecture.
Rich people, who preferred not to walk in religious processions, watched the ceremonies from their balconies. They threw flowers and donations. One of these houses has 5 balconies, the most in the city. Lima is known as the City of Balconies. Then we flew to Cusco. 10% of the original city of Cusco remains, while Machu Picchu was untouched by the Spanish. Cusco was the capital of the entire region of Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, and Chile when the Spaniards arrived. We traveled along the Urubamba River through the center of the Sacred Valley. Now here is a unique hotel. Look to the upper left. One has to be hardy to get to it. Look to the lower right. On the train to Aguas Calientes, we saw a number of ancient, Inca, terraces, and a few archaeological sites. From there, we took a bus up to Machu Picchu. On the way back through the Sacred Valley, we had a picnic on top of a mesa. Big blue tent, linen, goblets, silverware, wine, the whole 9 yards. Back in Cusco, we visited the first Catholic church in Peru, where one of the Sunday masses is still said in Quechua. The Spaniards built this church on top of a native temple. The Inca resisted evangelism at first because the Spaniards destroyed their buildings. However, eventually they integrated their culture with that of the conquerors. The Virgin was frequently shown as a triangle with no feet, which was the Inca symbol for Mother Earth. A white bird was the Holy Spirit. Now here is a wonderful painting of the Last Supper. Food on the table was local: guinea pig, corn, avocados, passion fruit. Judas is the only disciple looking away from Jesus Christ. He looks like Pizarro, the Spanish conqueror.
We then flew to Iquitos, a city of 1 million, all of whom seem to ride 3-wheeled motorcycles called tuk-tuks. It's the world's largest city that cannot be reached by road. We drove a short way to Nauta, where we boarded the Dolphin II. Our boat, which was more like a floating hotel than a cruise ship, had 16 passenger cabins with crew space below. We were 27 paying clients with about as many crew. The boat had a dining room, bar, and observation deck, meeting room for lectures, and a passageway on the main deck to get to the motorized skiffs. Rio Marañón, and Rio Ucayali were two major tributaries that form the headwaters of the Amazon. We traveled up the Marañón and then back down across the Amazon and then up on the Ucayali. We're actually on the Amazon for all of 30 minutes. While it's the longest river in the world, with 1,100 tributaries, here it looked like a big lake.
The cabin stewards are wizards with towels. Fernando the sloth is reading my bird book. Here's a dog with my reading glasses. And finally, 2 lovebirds. The dining room was always exquisitely decorated with varying local crafts on display. Even when we had breakfast on the skiffs, the table decor appeared. The usual breakfast bar was wonderful. The over-the-top food was always attractively presented, even the rolls. Some of us went swimming with noodle floats and beer in Clavero Lake. Bill managed to get through the trip without his electric shaver. We ended our trip in Lima, staying at the Belmont Miraflores Hotel, the most luxurious we have ever stayed in. Up at 4 a.m. to catch our flight to Miami, American Airlines business class is very nice.
Peru may be underrated as a tourist destination. There's much to see and do. Just about everyone speaks English, which disappointed Sarah, who worked very hard to get her Spanish language back up to speed. We suggest you put Peru on your bucket list.